Hello and welcome back to Quilts Bloom at Dawn. Last week we made the first two blocks of our Galway Bay pattern. We started out by making our tall houses. We made a bunch of these. Matter of fact, I finished these up. And then in addition to our tall houses, we also made our boats, our sailboats here. So made a few of those to go along with our Galway Bay pattern as well. So today we have one more official block to make for the Galway Bay pattern, and that is our pinwheel block. And these are pretty easy to make. We'll be able to get these made pretty quickly. So I'll be demonstrating this. I'm excited to say that in addition to our pinwheel blocks, today we will also be making a lighthouse block. So this is not actually part of the Galway Bay pattern. However, I incorporated that into one of my recent Galway Bay quilts and liked it so much I really wanted to do it again. So this is actually a pattern that's available on Etsy, and I'll include a link to the description if you'd like to purchase that. It's made by a company called Refine and Shine, and they just did such a great job. I was really pleased with this pattern, and it's actually, you can make individual blocks, and they come in many different size options, or you can make a whole quilt of them. But I've just made the individual blocks, but I've been busy working on making a variety of lighthouse blocks this week. Here's another one that I've made. So I just had fun playing with the different colors for these. And so we're, in addition to making our pinwheel blocks, we'll spend some time working on our lighthouses. Since our pinwheel blocks are pretty basic, let's get started with those. To make one pinwheel block, we'll actually need a print square and a background square. And then we're going to set another background square aside that once we make our pinwheel, we'll end up sewing this to basically make the bottom part of our pinwheel block, or it can be the top part, depending on how we put it on the quilt. But I'm actually going to make two of our pinwheel blocks. So you see I've got two prints and two backgrounds. So I'm going to go and make two at the same time, just because I like to do an assembly line approach. Actually, when I made all of these pinwheels that you see here, that is exactly what I did. I just did more of an assembly line approach, had fun selecting colors for these, and of course, you can't go wrong with the Nantucket Summer collection. I also used some of the shoreline prints, so this was, again, a lot of fun. Okay, so let's get started. So these go together pretty quickly. We're actually just going to put right sides together, and we'll do that on both of them. And then we're going to take this to our machine, and actually we're going to sew around the entire perimeter, a 1/4 inch away, around the entire square. We're going to do that on both of these. This way we basically make 4 half square triangles at one time. This is a great way if you have a lot of half square triangles. This is a great method to make them, where you can make 4 at once. So I will go ahead and take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to go ahead and again sew around this perimeter 1/4 inch away all around, and I'll do that on both of these, and then we'll take a look. All right, that was really fast. I was able to get, again, all of this sewn, and again, if I turn it over, you can see it's sewn all the way around a 1/4 inch, and I did this on both of them. So at this point, and because it'll be easier to see, I'll just show, I'm just going to do it right in half diagonally. I went on ahead and got my rotating mat. It just makes it easier when you're doing something like this. All right, so I've got this cut into 4ths, and look at that. We have 4 half square triangles. We're going to get these trimmed down in a minute, but first, let me go ahead and get the other one cut just like this. Again, what's nice is I don't have to be too exact on this either, because I know I'm going to trim it all down. I have a little bit of flexibility. Not that you want to use that, but you do have that option because they do start with a little bit larger. Okay, the next step is to go ahead and take this over to the iron to get this pressed. As far as how we're gonna press this and which direction, we have a couple options. I'm gonna show you how I do mine. So I went on ahead, when I actually made my half square triangle, you see that I actually pressed them all toward the background, which I had a darker background, which is why I pressed it all that way. So, and I did that on all 4 of them. But then you notice when I sewed my half square triangles together, I actually pressed those seams open. The reason I did that is it makes this lace so much flatter when you do it that way. So you may want to go ahead and press these open. You can do that if you'd prefer. That's one option. I did not feel like there was too much bulk in this the way I had it. So that's why I went on ahead, and on this I sewed to one side. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and sew to the background side since that's darker. I'm going to do that on all of these. But then the next step, when we actually sew these together, I will press my seams open. All right, so I'm going to go get all of these pressed and then we'll take a look. All right, I'm back and I got all of these pressed, like I said, going towards the background, which is the dark side for me. The next step is we're going to get our half square triangles trimmed down per the pattern instructions. Now to get this trimmed down, I'm actually going to use this block lock. It's a wonderful tool. If you don't have it, you're probably going to want this. You don't have to have that. You can do the same thing with a square ruler. You'll just need that diagonal line down the middle to help you be able to, again, make sure you get that right centered where you need it. So if I wanted this, let's say I wanted this to be 2.5 inches, I would just bring it right on down like that. And so I would know to cut it just like this, right there. However, since I have block lock, oh my goodness, it makes things so nice. What makes it so great, there's a couple things that makes it great. Number one, it's got this ridge, so it essentially locks, hence the name block lock. It locks on your block. It goes right over that seam. So now, like, see when I move, it just slides because it's sliding right along that seam that we've sewn. So I'll start out by, again, getting this to the size I need it to be. And then I go ahead and just cut. I'm able to cut 2 sides at once. Now here's the amazing part. I don't have to move this. I literally slide this down like this. And this side matches up as well. So I just literally trim it down like this. And boom, it is done. And it's sized perfectly. Isn't that amazing? I tell you, quilters come up with the most amazing tools to help us out. And I'm going to do that now on each one of these squares. And it goes pretty quick. Again, with a tool like this, you can get to going pretty quick with this as well. It does make it a little easier if you have something like this. So I'm just going to keep getting all of these done. We'll be done with this in no time. And just like that, I've got my first set of half square triangles cut. I'm going to go ahead and get this other set cut just the same way. Now that we have our half square triangles trimmed down, it's time to go ahead and get them arranged to make our pinwheel block. So I've got my first one. Let's see, so I'm kind of always thinking about coming out from this center here, right? So let's see, what's next? All right, so there's our pinwheel shape. Once you get your pinwheel shape, I'm actually going to just stack my other right on top of it. Again, to do my assembly line approach, it's just my preferred method. That way I can get a little bit more done in less time. The next step is to go ahead and just put right sides together. And then I will go ahead and get this pinned. Do the same thing with this one. And then I'll do the same thing with this row. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get these over to the sewing machine, get all 4 of these now sewn together, and then we'll take a look. All right, I've got all of these sewn, and it's time to get these pressed. And just to show this again, this is where I will press all of these open now. So I'll start by sewing these 2 together, and you see this is pressed open. Then I'll do these 2, press open. So I'll go get all of these pressed open and then we'll take a look. All right, we're down to our last seam to make our pinwheel. So again, I will put our right sides together, and you notice I have all of this pressed open, just like I had mentioned. So you do want to go ahead and start right here in the center and get this aligned really carefully. And I'd use the polka pin method to do that. And it should come right where it's supposed to, just like it did. If it doesn't line up just like it should, you can kind of pull this apart and move that pin where you need it to go, so it does align. And then I'll go ahead and put another pin on either end. And we'll do the same thing on this one. Again, get those seams lined up carefully. Poke that pin in. Let's see if it comes through. Yep, it came right through where we wanted it. The negative though to pressing open is the seams are more likely to unravel. So you do have to watch that, especially when you're poking pins in it. Okay, I'm gonna go take this to the machine and get both of these pressed 1/4 inch away. Then I'll go ahead and get it pressed open, and then we'll take a look. Okay, I'm back, and our beautiful pinwheels are done. It's time to just go ahead and attach our square to that. So again, I'll just align this like this. Right sides together, and I'm going to go get both of these sewn 1/4 inch away and get this pressed, and we'll look at our final pinwheel blocks. And just like that, our pinwheel blocks are done. So these definitely come together pretty quickly. You'll be able to make a bunch of these in no time at all, especially using that 4 at a time method. So we have now officially made all the blocks that we will need in this quilt. So as you go ahead and just make the total numbers needed per your pattern instructions, that if you're just making the Galway Bay pattern as is listed, that's all you'll need. However, if you're planning to incorporate some Lighthouse blocks, we'll go ahead and get started on that next. Here is the Refine and Shine design by Jillian Yawn. That's the actual quilt pattern that I'm using, the Lighthouse quilt pattern block, and I printed this out. I actually ordered the digital version. And I am including a link to this like I mentioned, so it's in the description. If you haven't ordered this, you can go ahead and purchase that and get that downloaded and join us. I'm covering up all the dimensions, but I just wanted to show you, it lists all these different block sizes, so you really have lots of options. The other thing I love about this pattern is she does include all of the letters, so you know exactly what piece you're using, what size that you need for that. So again, it's a well laid out pattern, so I think you'll really like it. It's not a hard pattern to follow. And for this, we'll actually be making it based on the 12 by 18 inch size block. So that's what I'll be looking at, and that's what I use to cut all of my pieces. And I've gone on ahead and labeled all of my pieces per the pattern. So that's going to make it very easy to just grab what you need for each step of the process. So for step 1, we're going to use these two pieces, F and E. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those, set this aside, and we will get started. Now, unfortunately, for this very first step, it got a little bit ahead of me, and I didn't have it on video where I actually cut this first piece. If this had not been cut, I would simply align it right here. Then I would draw a line from this corner to this corner, and then sew a 1/4 inch from it. Or if you have my most favorite tool, the Mini Simple Folded Corners Ruler by Doug Lico, then it makes it really easy because I was able to just align it like this and trim. So I'm going to go ahead and get this first one sewn up. We'll do the rest of them together, but I'll go ahead and get this sewn up and we'll continue with that step 1. All right, now that I've got this side sewn up, we're going to go ahead and affix this blue strip. And so this is all still part of step 1. And she's got wonderful photos to show you exactly what you're doing. All right, once I have that carefully lined up, I'll go ahead and put my Mini Simple Folded Corners ruler. Now, I would have to say, of all the different tools that I've purchased, I think this one has been the most helpful to me. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get a couple pins in this. All right, I'm going to go get this sewn up. All right, we've got this sewn up. And again, you can see we're not going to lose our point when we sew this. We've got our 1/4 inch allowance there. But I will set this aside so we can move on to step 2. All right, I've got all the pieces that I need to put together step 2. If you notice, I have for C, these are all 3 C. And then this is 2 B's and a D. Now, you have a couple options with the C pieces. This is obviously going to be the light that's emitting from the lighthouse. Now, you can either do it the way I'm doing it, where I have the light, which is going to be, again, part of the lighthouse. And here's an example of what mine look like, one that's done. So you can actually see there it is. So you can either do it like this, and then have the background on either side. Or another example that's included is where you would have a lighter yellow coming out. So that way basically the light's emitting even further than just the lighthouse. So you can do it however you prefer. I chose to keep the yellow just within the lighthouse and then use the background color for the other. But again, just your personal preference there. And then, of course, the 2 B's and the D. So I'm going to move these aside and we'll focus on first just sewing this together. And it's just that easy. We're just literally going to do 1/4 inch seams here and get that pressed. And then we'll be done with this. It's that fast. All right, so this is how far we've made it so far. So I'm going to set this aside along with this. And we're going to go ahead and finish up our step 2. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get all these pieces sewn together, 1/4 inch on these 2 seams. This will be pretty quick. I'll get this pressed and then we'll take a look. Okay, we've got one more step to this section, and that is again using pieces D and then 2 C's. Once we get this sewn together, then we'll go ahead and sew all of this together. But I'll go ahead and set these aside for another minute while we work on this last section here. Okay, so if you notice in the picture, it has you align it just like this. So if you are using your ruler and marking, again, this is how you'll do it. Diagonal line on either side like this. So a 1/4 inch from it. You'll do the same thing on this. If you are using the mini simple folded corners ruler, I'm actually going to turn it like this to get the right orientation that I'm going to need. I'm going to line it carefully right where it needs to be. And now I'll go ahead and just trim this. Because again, we want this to lay out like this. You always have to think through. I've definitely messed it up before. I have new little house pins, which I love them, but when they first come, they always stick a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and get this side ready. And again, I want it to be the same where it'll open out like this. So I'm going to go ahead and align this right here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this sewn and pressed, and then we'll take a look. All right, this top section of our lighthouse is sewn into strips now. So we are ready to go ahead and sew all of these together. So I will do right sides together this way and this way. Now for both of these, because you are dealing with these diagonal points, you are going to want to consider that with your 1/4 inch. So you will want to use your poke pen method. Matter of fact, that's the first thing I'm going to do. It should kind of line up nicely. So I start with that. But then I go ahead and poke it in. And just to make sure it comes through right where it should. And there it is. See, I think I probably a little too much. Okay, there it is. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Again, kind of line that up. That lined up nicely. Then I find the center point of this. And again, if you have any gaps and you need a little extra, all right, we're going to do the same thing here. So I start by just kind of lining it up on the edge, but then I'm really going to be focused on these points lining up. Oh, that came out first try. Doesn't always work like that, but I'll take it with it on camera. Ah, I just got really lucky both times. Really, if your seams are done right, that's the goal, right? But they're not always that aligned. I sometimes have to work with it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get both of these pressed and we'll take a quick look. All right, we just have one more seam to finish out this top section. So again, we'll get these right sides together. I'll get this pinned, sewn, pressed, and we're going to take a look. Okay, the top of our lighthouse is done. So we will set this one aside. For our next section, we need 4 of these H squares, 2 background that'll end up going on either side, and then 2 of our prints. Now the print color that I'm using, and again, I took this from the directions, I'm going to want the piece that's going to be, again, on this top half here to match this, because that's going to be the same using the same color or print. And then the bottom half, that we're basically making a half square triangle here. The bottom half, I'm going to use this print. So I'm going to go ahead and get these right sides together. And I'm going to use my folded corners ruler, except this one isn't quite so mini. All right, so same thing, it's just a larger size. I don't use this larger size one very often, but from time to time I do need it. All right, get this couple pins in this. All right, I'm gonna go get this sewn and pressed, and then we'll take a look. All right, so I've got this sewn and pressed, and now I'm gonna go ahead and do a seam on either side, attaching the background to it, and we will be done with this section. And just that quickly, step 5 is done. Now, actually, they're going to have us sew all these sections together at the end. However, if you want to go ahead and sew this together now, you certainly can do that. And I think I will. I'm going to go ahead and, again, align this just like I did the other one. And so I'm going to go ahead and put my pin in. Make sure it comes right where it's supposed to. Then I go to the end. I do the same thing to this side. Get that where it needs to be. All right. Ah, I am just lucking out this time. It's aligning just like it should. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this sewn and pressed. All right, the top half of our lighthouse is now done. So again, I'm going to set this aside and we're going to move on to step 6. So for this next step, we'll need K and L. We're also going to need a couple of A pieces. These are those little tiny squares, so we'll grab 2 of those. And then we'll also need our 2G rectangles. I'll set these aside for right now, this and this, while we focus on these 2. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and again take my K piece and affix it on the L piece. And I'm going to turn it. Now again, because I'm using my folded corners ruler, I'm going to just grab that. Again, if you don't have this, then you'll go ahead and do a diagonal line marking and then sew a 1/4 inch from that. And by the way, all of these cuts that we're making, these are fairly large diagonal pieces. I'll definitely add to my stash. Actually, I'm adding it to my scraps. All right, I'll go get this sewn up. Now that I've got that seamed and pressed, I'm going to go ahead and align these little squares in the corners. If you want to just take a peek, we're going to definitely want to make sure it's the right orientation. Just make sure again that this and this is the same print to again get that look that we're trying to go for. So as long as you've got that same fabric right there on top. Once we confirm that, we're ready to go ahead and put our little squares in the corners. We're back to our mini simple folded corner ruler. Same thing on this side. All right, I'm going to go get this sewn and pressed. All right, I've got those corners sewn and pressed, and we are ready to go ahead and put on our G background squares on either side. So I'm going to go ahead and get this sewn together and we'll take a look. Okay, that section is done, and just to see how it's all lining up, oh my goodness, it's going to be a pretty lighthouse. We are getting so close. We just have one more segment. So I'm going to set this aside, and this time we're going to pull out J. So our one big J rectangle, and then our I. And I is going to go right on top of this and that right side right there. And so then we're going to basically, if you don't have the folded corner ruler, you'll be doing your marking right here from this point to the end of that one. But since we have our ruler, I'm going to turn the orientation the way I need it, because I want it to cut this way. All right, get this pressed. All right, and now I'm going to go and get this pinned. All right, I'm going to go get this sewn and pressed. Okay, the next step is to go ahead and trim off the corner for these small little squares again, just like we've been doing. And I'll do this on this side as well. Okay, I'm going to go get this sewn and pressed. And the last step before we put the rest of this together is to go ahead and sew on the two background pieces on either side. I'll go ahead and get that done and we'll take a look. Okay, our lighthouse is down to 3 sections. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these two together. This is our bottom 2. So this whole bottom half is now done. All right, we're down to our 3 sections. So the next step is to go ahead and sew these 2 sections together. Now the one thing I do want to show you, this is right here where all these 3 points come together. That is where you want to sew that to this. And then over here on this side, it's going to be about right here. So I go ahead and line it up again about where I think I'm going to need it. And then put right sides together. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my pin and see if it came out right. So I'm going to just use that poke a pin method and make sure this aligns. And again, I'm wanting it to come kind of where all those seams came together. Pretty lined up there. We'll do the same thing on this side. Okay, I'm going to go get this sewn together. I'm going to go ahead and line this up just like I did before. Again, I'm going to put a pin here and here. And here and here, so I just want to kind of eyeball that first, so we make sure it kind of lines up the way it's supposed to. right, now I'll go ahead and get this one sewn together and then I'll get the whole thing pressed. And just like that, our lighthouse block is done. And so depending on what you're doing, you can go ahead and make however many you want for your quilt. On the first quilt that I made, per the pattern instructions where I added lighthouses, I added a total of 3. I started with 1 and loved the look so much, I felt like it needed a couple more. And so I did just strategically place 2 more. So if I was making it by the size of the pattern, that is my preference. But I also think it would be nice to just do 1 and kind of make that the focal point. So you really, whatever is your preference. Now, if you would like to, if you're planning to make this king size, I'm likely gonna probably do at least 5. It's possible I'll add 7. And then I thought it would be nice to make one just into a pillow or even just a wall hanging, I even thought about. So I'm not really sure exactly what all I'm gonna do, but I have 8 of these made for mine. And then, like I said, lots and lots of pinwheels. Pinwheels are just fun to add. Anywhere you think you need a little bit of something else going on, you can add a pinwheel block so easily. And then, of course, our boat blocks. And finally, lots and lots of tall houses here. This is all of my blocks now that are made. The only thing I have in addition is the blank spaces, because you will end up having some where you just have some blank. You need to have some place to rest your eyes. So I've got some of those cut as well. So I now have everything I need to start the next step of the process, and it's really fun, and that's where we begin to lay it out. So we'll work on that next week. This was a lot just getting through both of these blocks, but I encourage you, if you're not done, keep working on getting all these blocks made. They really do, especially if you do the assembly line approach, they go together really quickly. So I just encourage you to just keep working on that. And the lighthouses, like I said, they're actually pretty fun to make. The hardest part really is just this top, these strips. Once you get, and really they're not hard, once you get that made, these bottom sections are so large they go together pretty quickly. So I encourage you, just work on getting all your blocks made. And on our next video, we'll go ahead and get all of these laid out. In addition to doing our layout and sewing this together, we're also going to finally begin our first fall project, and that is our pumpkin picking pattern. So I encourage you, go ahead and gather your fabrics. We'll go ahead and get that cut, and we'll be ready to put that quilt together pretty quickly. Finally, we'll be turning to fall. After 3 Nantucket Summer quilts, we'll begin focusing on the fall. For those of you that have been sewing with the Nantucket Summer fabrics right along with me, oh my goodness, this has been so much fun. And as far as I'm concerned, it is not the end of Nantucket Summer. It's just putting it away for now to focus on fall and Christmas. But I am sure to be back to my Nantucket Summer again in 2026 because it is one of my favorite collections. But for now, I'm setting this aside to focus on some other projects. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, and until next time, happy quilting!